Welcome to the Sutherland Report. Thank you again for giving me the privilege of your time. There are those moments when you have a huge joy to bring on a expert, and I am very, very privileged to do that now. And that is to bring on Patrick Wood, who in many ways needs no introductions, but I will ask him to introduce himself. He has been the center of, I think, educating us in regard to technocracy, the technocracy movement. And I'm delighted to bring Pat on because I need to hear his opinion on what he thinks is going on in the UK and the characters that we have actually running this country. Pat, lovely to see you. And thank you so much for joining me. So it's much appreciated.
You bet. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Pat. Pat, can you just, for just a short while, just describe the work that you have been doing for many, many years? And I know that we have mutual friends, also a connection with quite an incredible historian, Mr. A.C. Sutton, who you work with and knew personally. So I just wonder if you could describe your website and what you focus on.
You bet. My shortest introduction ever was given by a guy in South Africa. Actually, he called me. He introduced me as the living expert on technocracy. That was it. I didn't know exactly how should I take that, but I have emerged as the living expert on technocracy at this point. I kind of invented the genre. Well, that's not right, but I was the first one to pick up on it. And I did so because of my earlier work with the detailing the Trilateral Commission. Hang on a second here. I got rid of this. Oh my gosh.
Don't worry.
There we go. Okay. Get rid of that. Kill it altogether. My earlier work with the Trilateral Commission with Anthony Sutton sensitized me to the phrase the new international economic order. That's what the Trilateral Commission has said in 1973, all over the literature. We didn't know what to make of it at that point. I do now, because there's never been a new economic order at all in the history of the world. Never. Except for technocracy. So when I discovered historic technocracy, that just set off alarm bells. What's this? Never heard of this before. And then I started to do some research on it, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I ended up writing 3 books on it, and I did all the original research on it. Well, I had help, actually. But here I am today. You know, this is such an amazing story. When the Trilateral Commission picked up technocracy in 1973 in the first place, that was Zbigniew Brzezinski's technocratic era, as they called it. It was a scam on one hand because the object was to get all the resources of the world under their control. That was the big picture. Gather all the resources of the world, get them away from the people, get them away from the nation states, get them into our hands so we can, make allocations to everybody on the planet and micromanage everybody on the planet as well. Well, fast forward, when I discovered historic technocracy, all of the pieces fell into place like a puzzle that you've been struggling with for years, just to find the right pieces, to go in certain places to make the thing complete. The picture just emerged immediately to me that this was where the whole thing was headed, was technocracy. So when I just went to do the original research on technocracy, it took me all over the country. Honestly, I went to Edmonton, the University of Edmonton, and I did spend a lot of time there, going through their archives from the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And we sifted Columbia University as well. That's where technocracy was started in the first place. I have to give a shout out to my friend Carl Teichrib. I think you know who Carl is, right?
Absolutely, he's a dear friend. So thank you. Yeah.
There in the beginning, he helped me, especially with the Canadian research that I did, and the rest of history there. If it was not for Carl to give me a boost back in that day, I probably would not have cracked the nuts, so to speak. I also had help with another theologian from Germany, a guy by the name of Dr. Martin Erdmann. He filled in the blanks for me philosophically and historically as well, to understand how this whole thing came about in the first place. So between the two of them, they gave me they were my booster rockets, if you will.
Thank you, Brad. When you're using that a really interesting phrase, historic technocracy, are you referring to people like Huxley and of course his brother in regard to their I think Julian's involvement with technocracy, transhumanism, and also with the writing of the Brave New World and UNESCO, the whole thing? Are you referring to them?
Well, it's just interesting that book that you showed here, Brave New World, that was written by Aldous Huxley. He was a Brit, by the way.
Yep.
Lot of interesting things come out of Britain all over the years. That book was modeled based on technocracy, because it was written in 1932. That was when it was released, and it so happened that the head of Columbia University, Nicholas Butler is his name. He spent probably half his time in Europe, stumping for who knows whatever. But he was a hobnobber. He likes to party with the kings and the queens and the premiers. Mussolini was one of his best friends. For instance, the guy, he came back to America, and people didn't like what he was doing over there, but nevertheless. So what Huxley was looking at was in the heart of technocracy. And if you read the book, you'll see there's no political system whatsoever. There's no mention of a political system at all. The whole society was run by technocrats. They didn't use that term, but nevertheless, this business, they call them the A plus or the A's. Yeah. That was the smart guys. They've been bred to be smart, genetically and modified, mind you, to be smart. Then you have the betas and the deltas and the gammas and the grunts at the bottom of the society, and everybody was bred and conditioned to accept their fate, right? To just that's your station in life. Too bad, but be happy about it. And so when they got stressed, they had a drug that they had to take. It was called Soma. There's a modern drug of Soma as well. Say, it's a like a for anxiety. And so whenever you get stressed about something, you just take an extra pill, Soma, and it would just immediately flatten you out, make you mellow. But everybody had to take their Soma every day at prescribed times to make sure that you wanted to rebel against the system. There was no family units. That you couldn't get women could not be pregnant because they had all the babies delivered in incubators, having been genetically modified for that purpose to be a delta or a gamma or whatever. And so there was no love, no marriage. Everybody had free access to each other's bodies. Free love, they would call it in the 60s, I'm sure, but it wasn't free. So this was the picture of technocracy. This is how an outsider from Great Britain saw the movement, say, there's a book in this. And so it became the dystopian book of the century, really. People are still talking about it today. They don't have a clue what the book is about, but even today, people say, "Oh, we live in a brave new world." They don't have a clue what's behind that. But Huxley was the first guy that identifies this, and of course, his brother Julian went on to found UNESCO. He was also the first guy that coined the word transhumanism,
yes,
or transhuman. And between the two of them, they're quite a pair. They changed the course of history, I do believe, in an evil way.
Yes, yes.
But
we've it's not about being clever. It's just trying to do the research because we've got to be on it. And a brilliant explanation. That's why I grabbed the book for you.
yes.
But of course, when you say about the evil, absolutely. And then we have to go back another generation or two generations, because their great grandfather, I believe, is Henry Huxley, who was Darwin's, as they describe over here, Darwin's bulldog. And
That's right.
You couldn't have said a truer statement, my friend, with the things that have come out of the UK, the things that have come out of Britain.
Yeah.
And also, when you were saying that and reflecting on that, and I can see you are beginning to sort of describe the world that we see a bit around us at the moment.
Yes.
You and I are talking just as Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, with that incredible dress sense that is totally out of this world, stepped down from. I just wonder what your thoughts on that, and also this new individual that is going to be there for maybe a short period of time before someone else comes in, or will he be there for a long period of time? This man that doesn't think, quoted as saying that water is not a human right, even though he's walked that back. What are your comments, Pat?
Well, Klaus Schwab is really old. And I don't know how old he is, but he's well in his 80s. Maybe he's in 90s now, but he's probably not long for the world. And who knows? Maybe he just got tired out. Maybe he has sick health issues. I don't know. But it was time for him to go, and I don't think he was pushed out necessarily. But we'll probably read his obituary some time in the future. Remember, even Henry Kissinger, who died at 100, and David Rockefeller, who I think was 101 or something like that, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, he died in his 90s. And, well, this is the old guard at this point. This is the old guard that they're passing away. And the new guard is set to take their place in society now. People like, like your Starmer, your prime minister, a younger guy,
the picture
right?
Up. Yeah, I'll put the picture up.
Exactly.
Slightly younger.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He, of course, he'll last for a few years anyway. But the old geezers are passing away at this point, And I'm glad that I was able to outlive Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, both of them. So
in fact, if we go back just quickly, there is a history lesson here, because Schwab then went to the school that Henry Kissinger set up.
Yes.
Was that in Harvard, Pat? So Schwab then attended that.
Yes.
Right. So he
Yes,
was mentored
exactly.
in that.
He was mentored by Henry Kissinger. And you can only imagine what their conversations were like back at that day. Something, I mean, Kissinger himself was a young guy at that point, relatively speaking. What they conspired, who knows? But they saw potential in both ways. Klaus Schwab saw the potential in Henry Kissinger, who was already a mover and shaker. And he went on to found the Trilateral Commission, or be a founding member of the Trilateral Commission, just a couple, 3 years after that, when they met at Harvard. So obviously Schwab was impressed by Henry Kissinger, but and vice versa. So Henry Kissinger mentored Schwab to go back to Europe and found what become an organization, what became the World Economic Forum. It was called different in the beginning, but nevertheless, it was a kind of an auxiliary to the Trilateral Commission to let them get a beachhead in Europe in particular, and to train people in Europe from multiple countries. That was not like the United States. Basically, in the United States, you have all the states. Here, they act in unison pretty much because we have a constitution. You can't do that in Europe. You have all these different countries. They have to be whipped into shape. That was Schwab's mission, to make this training organization and to have an influence in Europe, to get everybody marching into the same direction. So at the same time, the Trilateral Commission already had an entry into Europe, and its members, for instance, the members of the Trilateral Commission in particular, they were first responsible for setting up the EU in the first place. Yeah. So, and they've been instrumental ever since. So you have a 1-2 punch. You have the Schwabs sitting next to in parallel to the Trilateral Commission, individually doing their work to set things up, the machinery, and you have Klaus Schwab contributing the people who would then run that machinery to keep Europe in check. So he's gone now. In any case, he's gone. There'll be a new head, and somebody else will sweep in. He probably is not going to be hated as much as Schwab was, especially out. I mean, Schwab was Mr. Evil, right, or Dr. Evil. Yeah. He's just an easy guy to hate. So there's lots of pictures of him. Maybe that irked him. I don't know, but with his outfit, his uniform on, this crazy stuff. But whatever the case, the World Economic Forum is not out of business for sure, and neither is the Trilateral Commission out of business. A lot of people think, well, that was just for last century. There's nothing to see there. Well, they're sadly mistaken.
Absolutely, and let's remind ourselves. I think with Schwab's father, who ran, I think, Eisenweiss for the Nazis, this factory for the Nazis with slave labor, and then he received an award for a factory that was very well run by the under the Nazi regime, and all this. That in one sense we could go down that rabbit hole, because it's this whole thing of left and right, and who owns the definition of capitalism, and all this kind of thing. Is fascinating but very relevant. Pat, sorry if this sounds a stupid question, but how do you define how you are the living expert, amen, on this subject, and wishing you many years. We have a lot to do here in educating people, which you have been center of. How do you define the Trilateral Commission? Are we looking at, as you've said, the brave new world taking out politics? But are you saying this is the world will be run by corporations? Is that their dream?
Well, that's the bottom line. This was the plan from the get-go, and the more you understand historic technocracy and then modern technocracy, you could fill in the middle and see exactly how the Trilateral Commission fit into this whole thing. It was in 1932, the technocracy movement basically said there's not going to be anything like private property. Forget private property. It's all going to be owned by corporations at this point. Fast forward to today, where you have like the modern day philosopher of technocracy, Curtis Yarvin.
Yep. He
says that sovereign corporations are going to be running countries as if they're the lapdog of the technocrats. And he says every square foot on planet Earth is going to be owned outright by a SovCorp. That's what he called the sovereign corporation. This is crazy. It's really is crazy. But you could see this. You could see the wheels. I can see them. You might not see them, but I can see the wheels spinning in David Rockefeller's mind when he got wind there could be a way for him to end up owning all the resources of the world.
Right.
This has never been done in the history of the world, but maybe Job in the Old Testament, he was just localized, but he owned a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Gold mines and timber and farms and herds and cattle and sheep, whatever, the wealthy man. He didn't have any money. He didn't need money because he had all the resources under his control. The people needed those resources. So whatever he asked, they would pay him to get all that stuff, right? Well, this is kind of where Rockefeller, I think his mind was in 1973 when he teamed with Brzezinski, based on Brzezinski's book, by the way, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era.
Right.
That really set Rockefeller on a quest at that point to get all the resources in his pocket. And we have to remember where Brzezinski was at the time. When he wrote that book, he was a professor of political science at Columbia University.
Yeah.
There you go. It's just there's a trail of continuity there. He knew exactly what technocracy was. There's no way he could ever plead, "Oh, I didn't know anything about technocracy. Give me a break."
Right.
All these professors were still alive when Brzezinski started there. He ate lunch with them, and he kibitzed for about the old days, and so he was not ignorant for sure. But the word technocracy had been outlawed at Columbia University. You were not allowed to use that word. There's reasons for that, but literally it was outlawed there and under the threat of expulsion. So all the professors, they packed up their bags and put the technocracy stuff on the side, and they talked in other terms like the Technotronic era. And so when Brzezinski came along and said, well, it's going to be the Technotronic era, folks. Well, that's where where we are today, and you can see how this fast forward, people are still talking about getting all of the resources in the world into somebody else's hands, not ours, not the corporations, not the businesses that you might have, small business, doesn't matter, or big, getting all the resources away from everybody else and putting it into basically a global common trust. You can't, it's unmistakable at this point. This is historic technocracy. Fast forward to today, and the same stuff, same plan, same idea to get rid of the political system today. You see that too? These people spit in the eyes of politicians. They hate politicians with a passion. So,
well, I agree, and it'd be, in a short while, it'd be good to look at the whole UK and get your perspective on that. Pat, why did Colombia ban the word technocracy? What were their reasons for doing that?
It's a simple one. You remember I said that Butler, the president of Columbia University, he was an egomaniac.
Yeah.
On steroids. And he readily, and that was a seat of progressivism in our country at that point. And so he fashioned himself as being Mr. Progressive, whatever is going to happen in the world is going to be through him. Well, he was embedded in, he was so excited about the technocracy movement, being at Columbia University especially, he thought, oh, this is going to set us on fire. And he gave them half of the basement of Hamilton Hall. That's the only hall they had at that point. But he gave them the half the hall in this basement. And the other side he gave to IBM, the early iteration of IBM. That's where the first tabulator was built at Columbia University. These people were rubbing shoulders together with each other, right? The computer brainiacs on one side, the engineer brainiacs on another side. It was big, one happy family. And so Butler was bragging to his European buddies, especially, man, look at us, man. We got a handle on what's going on in the world here. Well, they found out that the head of the technocracy movement, a guy named Howard Scott, who passed himself off as a legitimate academic, they found out he didn't have any degree at all. He said he was a technician, whatever, but they couldn't find that where he'd gone to school, and he didn't have any credentials, and that just completely unplugged Butler at that point. And he said, "You guys are not only you're going to be out of here," and he kicked them out, all of them. It just hit the road, Toad, and kicked them all out of the basement. And the movement was over at that point. Now, it so happened that this guy, Howard Scott, went on with M. King Hubbards to recreate an organization called Technocracy, Inc. That's where my research basically started at that point. It was with Technocracy Incorporated. But that was a membership organization. It was not associated with Columbia University. So Butler said, "Don't ever mention the word technocracy to me again." And not only him, but the Hearst Empire that owned all the newspapers in that day, the same thing. They told all, because they were played mercilessly. They were played by the technocracy movement to get press for their meetings and stuff. And it was all based on Howard Scott being such a highfalutin engineer, So when they were being played by this guy, oh man, they just blew it too. They said the same thing. Don't ever mention technocracy in any article going forward, or you will be fired. That was, I have a memo, by the way, that they sent out. You will be fired. Wow. So that's why history did not record the technocracy movement. It was wiped clean off the plates of media. The newspaper articles, books might have been written, in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. There wasn't hardly anything at that point. So modern historians, missed the whole thing. because they, that's how you reconstruct history, is by going back and looking through the newspapers and whatever and the books to find out what was going on, and the lectures at the universities, that sort of thing.
This is why, Pat, your research, your work, along with our dear friend Carl Teichrib, and along with giving in a very important shout out to AC Sutton as well. This is why this is important, because Carl asked me to look at, he said, start looking at Murray, start finding out more about this individual. I'm just going to give that, just say that. And what horrified me, but we can now go in a slightly different direction. Murray, there were many Jewish students that attended Columbia, and it seemed that he was not very happy about that. So I think there was something like 53% of Jewish students attending Columbia, and he worked hard to reduce that. According to, this is on Wikipedia, I'll just throw that out there. He worked hard to bring that down to 23%. Now, also, when we look at IBM, and I forget the first, in 1939, I forget the man's name who was running IBM at that time, but I think he was publicly asked and said, what do you think about, the war, the coming war, what's happening in, Germany and Europe and all the rest, around about 1939, maybe beginning in 1940. And of course, he turns around and says, well, I want peace. Well, Pat, weren't they running a company called Deutsche Hieroglyph Maschinen? They had a punch card technology machine company on behalf of the Germans that was being run in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The direction of where I'm going with this, because it's also relevant, even more so with what we're seeing, on the streets in all our countries at the moment. So where does Hitler fit into this? Where does the Nazi movement fit into this and their attitude to technocracy?
The movement of Technocracy, Inc., almost to the day that it was founded, it showed up in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
With a separate, they said a separate organization. The Americans and the Canadian contingent, they kind of they denied it, but it was so thin of a denial, it was just crazy. But all of the articles that they posted here in America, they were translated into German and just repeated in the German publication, right? So it was pretty thin. And so you would figure, if you look at, for instance, if you look at the Germans who were at Columbia University, you would understand why the German mind would be all set for technocracy.
Right.
These are the people, the engineers of the world at that time, honestly, and the scientists of the world. It appealed to them immediately. So their chapter, it gained a lot of members initially. It was shut down by Hitler himself, however, just for appearance's sake, because he didn't want the appearance of another force operating against him or with him or whatever. He wanted all the credit for himself.
Right.
However, the technocrats moved into the Hitler regime, spread across all of the columns of power that he established. And he was very careful to make sure there was no communication between those columns of power except for him, because he wanted them to be separate and not colluding with each other. We discovered later that the technocrats who were in those columns of power, they took liberty to communicate amongst themselves to craft a strategy, a technology strategy that helped Hitler to do everything he did, the evil stuff during the war. And it was mostly based on the IBM tabulator, not exclusively, but that was a big thing, that allowed them to do statistical analysis, to do things like run and set and run train schedules, factories, stuff like that. You know, they knew who everyone was in their society thanks to the tabulator machine. That, by the way, was delivered by IBM to Nazi Germany under license. They had a no-compete clause in their contract that they could not buy the punch cards from anybody else in the world except for them. They denied this for years, by the way. They said, it was unfortunate. We sold our machines to Germany. They misused them, etc. We didn't give them any supplies for it. That was a bald-faced lie, and it's been exposed at this point in spades. That sorry guys, but yeah, IBM leased the machines. They've always leased their machines. They never gave anything away for sale. They leased their machines, and they required technicians on the payroll of IBM to service these machines in Europe and in Nazi Germany. So you have the Americans who went there to service these machines with supplies in hand, the punch cards. This is how Hitler ran his operation to slaughter all of the Jews and gypsies and blacks and anybody else he didn't like. It's incredible, just absolutely incredible. So this is the history of technocracy. People will ask me, well, why would technocrats, why would they want to do that? Are they that evil that they just wanted to kill everybody? No, that wasn't the issue really at all. But we see this, I see this today. The technocrats don't care who they serve. They really don't care. It could be Ronald Reagan. It could be Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Whoever is in power, they're going to launch their agenda under the cover of who's ever in political power. They don't care about politicians at all. So I think this was the case in Nazi Germany. The fact that they could ply their trade, if you will, that's a loose term, but you get my point.
I do.
They plied their trade for Hitler. And we see the outcome was really ugly for everybody involved. So, and then they branched, it wasn't just all about computers necessarily. They had their rocket, their rocket and war-making capabilities were legendary. All these, and many of these technocrats we know now were imported back into America and Russia also, but here in America, under this top secret operation called Operation Paperclip.
Absolutely.
Where at least 1,600 technocrats were reimported. Their resumes were sanitized. They were given, some of them, false identities. And they entered into American society and they applied their trade here. People like Werner Braun Braun.
Yeah.
The guy that sent rockets to the moon. So now we have them. Russia has their contingent. They took a bunch of them too, out of Nazi Germany. They never.
So Vernon von Braun was head of Hitler's rocketry, and then he became the first head of NASA.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Where, Pat? I do want to get on. I know we've got about 20 minutes, if just under that. And there is so much more we could talk about. And thank you for joining those dots up as well. Where does this is a huge subject. Where does Elon Musk fit into this? And I'm very aware that dear Carl, in his book Game of Gods, has talked about the Russian philosophy. There's philosophers there and building stations on Mars and all of this kind of thing. And sadly, I can't remember certain names or even grab his book, but he's into this. So also Musk's grandfather was head of technocracy in Canada, I believe, as well. So what are your thoughts here? Because this all has political implications as well with what's going on your side of the pond and relationships, including J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, etc.
Yes, exactly. So it's unmistakable to me that Elon Musk is leading the crowd towards technocracy, our government and everybody else in sight. This is a guy who grew up in a technocrat home. His grandfather was instrumental in Europe and Canada. He was over all the provinces in Canada. And by the way, his letters and his articles and stuff were all deposited at the University of Edmonton, and I read all those things. Here he was, signed Dr. Joshua Haldeman, right? So Elon Musk, even though he doesn't talk about that at all, he's a dyed-in-the-wool technocrat from the get-go. He has not had any other philosophy in his life other than technocracy. He's steeped in it. Generational steeping. Like you coined a word here.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
But at this point, he's the richest man in the world, they say. He's definitely a grandstander. He definitely has Asperger's syndrome. That's part of the what do they call it? The autistics.
Autism, yeah.
Exactly.
On the autistic spectrum, yeah.
Yeah. He's obviously interested in promoting technocracy at this point because he's sticking his nose into everybody's business around the world, not just here. He went to Germany. They really got mad, but he went to Hungary. He's been to the UK. Got mad. People got mad at him there, but he's asserting himself all over the world, as all other people around him at this people like the were associated with Peter Thiel, with the PayPal mafia, so-called, and Silicon Valley. This was all the founders of PayPal back in the early 2000s. And Peter Thiel was one of them. Elon Musk was a co-founder of PayPal as well. And he's been all along. You can see Elon Musk move along the spectrum up the ladder of technology by founding, for instance, co-founding OpenAI. That was one of his endeavors. So at this point, his political philosophy is clearly technocracy.
Yeah.
That's not fair. I can't say it's a political philosophy. It isn't. It's an economic philosophy. But in the process, they will get rid of all the politicians. They're going to be thrown under the bus at some point. All of them, all the politicians in the world, they should count their days when they're going to be thrown under the bus. They don't see it coming, especially in America. The American politicians don't have one clue that these technocrats hate their guts. They have from the get-go. So, at this point, these people have literally taken over the U.S. government today.
Wow. Well, Pat, we need about another 3 hours. But the key thing is this. The key thing is this: is for you, and I know you said it because you're doing these incredible round tables with our mutual friend John Haller as well, and you're discussing all this, and this is why it's important. As without putting words in your mouth, you, like other friends, were pleased that Kamala Harris didn't win. However, when you start talking along these lines, you're not making yourself very popular with other patriots in America who have not got their eyes open to this. Pat, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that a fair comment?
Yes, it is. And before the election, I told people I'm going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Only because I hated Harris and Biden. Mostly. They're horrible people.
Yeah.
But I said I'm gonna vote for Trump, but I'm gonna be holding my nose like that. When he gets in office, I'm gonna beat him to death about this technocracy nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing ever since. And he deserves it at this point, I have to say.
Do you think he's aware of the philosophy that's going on? Do you think he's aware of how he's being manipulated? If he suddenly wants to, we want to be the best at AI, we want to be better than China at this.
Absolutely.
Your thoughts?
He's no way that he can be ignorant at this point. He can't plead ignorance. People will say that about him. Well, he's just naive. Give me a break. You don't become a billionaire being naive, for Pete's sake. You got to have something on the ball, right?
Yeah.
He knows exactly what's going on. And at this point, people like Curtis Yarvin, he's the pop philosopher that Peter Thiel subscribes to. He's guy's a total technocrat. But this is the guy who said, what we need in America now, we need a monarch. We don't need a president. We don't want a president. We don't want to forget the politicians.
Wow.
They're screwing everything up.
Yeah.
We need a monarch in our country to take charge and get everything back together, and then we'll turn it over to democracy again after that. Forget that. That never happens in history. Yeah. So at this point, they're saying we need a monarch. That's not the American people, but this is what this brain trust of technocrats are saying. We need a monarch. Well, who's the likely candidate to be monarch in our country? It's not going to be Joe Biden. I mean, break. It's, so they're playing Trump at this point to be the monarch of our country. Now, they're probably going to throw him under the bus at some point as well. That's a material. In the meantime, he thinks he's going along with the program because they're pandering to him, and they're setting him up to be the monarch of America.
Wow!
And by the way, your prime minister, Keir Starmer, came to America just recently with a secret letter from King Charles, opened by the president in his presence, not King Charles, but in the presence of Starmer. And the letter opened up, and he is an invitation for America to join the Commonwealth of England to become, well, they said the ceremonial something or another. But I look at, well, you have to be that before you can be a full member. So, but Trump really liked that idea. Oh, I'm all for that. We want to be a good neighbors sort of thing. And
I hear you. And that also is because of where he's, as you say, I love the royal family, love the Queen Elizabeth II. And that's also family, isn't it? It's where his mother coming from Scotland and all the rest. He has a very special place in his heart for the UK.
Yes.
I hear you. The other thing about the whole Commonwealth thing, and I remember Dan Happel introducing me to this book, which is Joan Vion's book about the sustainable prince, and the fact that what people don't realize is that the Commonwealth gets together. There's this Commonwealth countries, there's this block vote within the United Nations, and all this kind of thing. Pat, I'm in the last sort of 5 minutes, and I do want to. We've got to sit down and do this again. We need a whole thing on the UK, but I just want to put a picture up, and I want, when you mention Starmer, we'll just put this picture up and just say, there's Starmer in the middle, there's Mike Pompeo to the right, and there's the previous ambassador to America on the left. Now, I saw this on Twitter the other day. There is no one in mainstream media is talking about the fact that Starmer was a member of the Trilateral Commission, which he stepped down from in 2022. No one believes this. Go and do the research. It's on their website. Now, I don't know when he joined, whether it was 2017, but as a member then of Labour's Corbyn, as Corbyn was ahead of the Labour Party, Mike Pompeo at that time of that picture, this discussion was saying we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that Corbyn wouldn't win, who to everyone obviously seemed like a total and utter communist. Where Starmer, with his legal background, member of the Fabian Society at some point as well, this whole thing, let's have a revolution without firing a gun and we'll get into all the institutions. Pat, what say you about that photo and these relationships and the fact that he has kept all this hidden and we do not discuss over here this body at all? We all think it's, even this discussion would just be seen as a bunch of conspiracy theories.
It's really sad. I know it's really sad that people just don't see the history of the Trilateral Commission. And remember, Anthony Sutton was a Brit. You know, here's the guy who should speak to Britain at this point about the Trilateral Commission. He wrote the book with me, the Trilaterals over Washington. Yeah. And that included Europe, by the way. Yeah. But nobody paid attention. Well, we were censored mercilessly back in that day, but nevertheless, we wrote the book on it, and people didn't pick up on what we're talking about. But today, we see the members of the Trilateral Commission, they're shifting not their long strategy, but they're shifting the short-term strategy at this point to accommodate what's happening now with this great reset that's going on right as we speak. Yeah. This is what Donald Trump is all about, shaking everything up in the world. It's going to be like scorched earth policy before he's done. And he's going, out of that will rise the technocracy, the scientific dictatorship of the world. And Starmer's part of that plan at this point. We see another trilateral in Canada right now as well.
Mark Carney trying to win that election. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, they have an agenda, obviously. And it's a serious agenda, but now they're shifting their focus to get behind or stay behind the technocracy movement. You see people, and this is interesting, the big shakeup that took place with OpenAI and the board of directors 2 or 3 years ago. The leader, Sam Altman's, picked other directors to fill a void. He picked a member of the Trilateral Commission, an old geezer, Larry Summers, the former secretary of whatever here in our country, to be on his board of directors. Oh, at OpenAI. Really?
Did Larry Summers take away the divide between sort of private banking and sort of Wall Street-esque behavior? And I can't think of the words off the top of my head. And then he was embedded in the Clinton administration. It was the Glass-Steagall Act. Is it the Glass-Steagall Act?
Yes.
Oh my goodness me.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, the movers and shakers of the world at this point are still beholden to the Trilateral Commission. Period of end of subject. So I watched them like a hawk. Wow. In fact, it was a member of the Trilateral Commission who stood up 2 or 3 years ago in India at their plenary meeting that they had and said this is year one of the new international economic order. They just said it. That they couldn't report it, but somebody ratted on them and said, this is exactly what they said in this meeting. This is year one of the new international economic order. I think I was 23. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And now I have to say, just in closing, now Starmer's saying globalization is over. Whoa.
Absolutely. And no one is joining the dots. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because we've got to join these dots. Because the mainstream media won't, as it's so won't. Because they've gone along with all the madness that we've had over the last 5 years. Pat, I just want to thank you so much for this conversation, and I do want to do it again. So in the last sort of 1 minute, where can people find your work? Where can they find you?
Technocracy.news, and also at patrickwood.substack.com.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to thank you so much. And will you come back and we can continue this conversation? I would be very indebted to you to do that, because there is so much to talk about, and history is so important. And you are quite rightly the living embodiment of technocracy history. So long that may continue. I'm just going to play us out, sir, and I'll say goodbye to you on the other side. Thank you so much.
God bless.